All right, so back in our text editor here, let's write some code to produce forms. So we'll begin with the form tag. So when we write the form and we use like the auto um, generated code from the suggestion, it gives us an attribute called action. Okay, I'll explain later what this action does, but in a nutshell, what it does is it provides an address to which the form will be submitted. Like when we hit submit on a form, there has to be an address where the input that is collected on the form is sent over. Okay, that's what the action does. So within a form, let's begin to write some input elements. We'll have input of type text. Input of type text. This allows us to provide a regular form field that we can supply inputs to, just in a free text form, like email, first name, last name, any of those information that you type and you see exactly what you're typing. That's like a text input. Okay. So apart from the type of text, we also have other attributes. Attributes like name. We also have ID. We can use ID. We can use value. Okay. So the name attribute allows us to tag this input. Okay. Every input has to have a name so that the data that is supplied to it can be accessed through that name. So if I'm supplying a field of first name, obviously we can provide a default value from our code here of probably John, right? But obviously from the interface, from the web interface, the user himself or the users themselves can change this. Okay, can provide a value that will override this one. So what that means is we don't even need to provide a value like so, except when we're trying to like pre-fill a form. Probably a form has already been filled and we need to get the value that was filled before to apply it back there, and then so that the user can change what they filled previously. So that would be a case where we would need to do something like this. Other than that, users take charge of that. Okay. The last field here is ID. What would ID do? But first, before we look at that, let's see what this looks like on the browser. Okay. So as I refresh this on the browser, I see that I have an input element, very simple input element here, with value in the box showing John, and you can see that I can actually type freely into this box. I can type whatever text that's available on my keyboard into this box. So that's an input element of type text. Okay. Another attribute that this can have is what we call placeholder. So a placeholder allows us to sort of give a hint on what this form is supposed to be, or what the value that should go into the form should be. Like in this case, first name. So if the user sees the form and no input has been supplied, like no value rather has been specified, we could actually have a value attribute with empty string as its value. So here now, because we don't have a value, we can see the placeholder text there, showing us a hint that this should be a first name. So if I'm filling up the form, I know that my first name goes there. That's the input element in a nutshell. Okay, the input element of type text rather. So there are other types of input. So we have input of type. Um, we have input of type checkbox. So a checkbox also takes a name attribute, an ID, and so on and so forth. Okay, but what a checkbox does is slightly different. It just gives you a checkbox. Like there's no hint whatsoever. You can't add the text there to show that, oh, this text box is for this value. So this checkbox is for say, do you love programming? Tick it. There's nothing showing that. So for us to get a text like that, we use what we call labels. Okay, so labels allow us to provide some hint about what an input element should be about. So we'd have something like, do you, or select, let me just use select your schools of choice. Okay, so schools of choice. So this is like a question that requires more than one answers, right? So I'm just using the BR tags just to space them out, put them on separate lines. So for this particular one, we could say your school of choice. So actually, this should be a H3 tag, for instance, a header saying select school of choice as the instruction. And then we'll have a label. The first label will be like Unilag. Then that checkbox will just be beside it, just to keep it a bit more clean. Or even, yeah, we can actually just leave it as it is, 2 lines. Then we have another separate label, and this would be for uni just, for instance. Okay, then we have another one, another label for the text would display Java Tech. Okay, so right now we see, yeah, we see this is the way it displays now. So select your school of choice. You can select this, and this. But there's really nothing telling us here, just the way we have the name attribute of first name. There's really nothing telling us that all the values I provide here will be for something called school of choice. Again, that's what this name attribute does. So we could literally just use this and say school of choice. I'm just using the underscore to separate the words so that it looks a bit more clean. And then all of these options here will be applied to the value of will be applied to the key school of choice. Okay, or rather the field school of choice, better put. And so still we can still select everything, but now the underlying mechanism that allows us to know which attributes or which values are supplied to um, has been introduced by we using this name element here. Okay, so let's move on. That's type of input. That's input type of checkbox. So another type of input is radio buttons. Okay, so have radio buttons that allow us to make selections also, just like the checkbox. But now we can only make one choice out of a list of or a couple of options that were presented. So I'm just going to again copy the block of code I had here, but now the title will be different. Select your school of choice. This is no longer schools, now school of choice. So the same options, but now instead of checkbox, I would have radio. Change the type from checkbox to radio. So I'll take this off. So it's schools of choice. Then this just one singular. Okay. So if I refresh here, let me just say select your preferred school. Right? Now, in the case of this, you can only select one out of this. You can see the difference between this and this, right? Yeah, that's checkbox and radio buttons in on the web. So let's move on quickly to the next type of input. Still in the category of input elements of type text, we have a different variation that we call password, input of type password. Now this presents us in the browser. If we save and check this out, it gives us something that's very similar to this, but we will be able to type in information that will be hidden to the user. Okay, so just which is typical of a password. The password should not be revealed. That's what an input element of type password is rendered as. Again, it has the same properties as this, where we can use first name, ID, value, placeholder, and so on and so forth. All right. But now let's look at what the ID attributes would actually solve for. Sometimes we want to use labels. We want to use labels to show that the input element should be mapped to this particular label. So this input element of type password, which name should be password. The ID should be password, so that with the ID we can map it with these four attributes here. Okay, the four attribute allows us to map this password to this input element. And what value does that give us? What value does that give us? You can see as we click on password here, we've not clicked into the input element. We clicked just on the password text here. Okay, this text here. As we click on it, it highlights and drives focus into the input element. We can type our password, provide the value there. So that's what the label form can also do. And why would you want to have the label where you can also have a placeholder? Now, if you observe this first name right now, the way the placeholder is reviewed, but then not reviewed, hidden on, you can see that it's hidden when we type a value into it. Okay, that is not the case, or rather that is that feature is going to make us not actually understand what goes into that field anymore. So like right now, I don't know that this is a first name field, and that's where the label comes in. So to solve that, I would just simply attach a label here. I could also give it a value. I can give the four attribute a value and use that value to tie it with the ID of the type of first name, so that again give a text of first name, and then we see the first name. So even though the label is no longer there, I mean the placeholder may no longer be there, in which case we may actually just decide to remove the placeholder. So that's first name, and we type in the value into that section. Awesome. So let's keep going real quick. We also have input of type select. So select allows us to produce a drop down. A drop down, something that presents a list of options within which you can select just one. So let's see how that comes together. So we have the select. Again, it has a name attribute. So let's assume that this is again school of choice, preferred school, using the same value here. We'll call this preferred institution. And then what we would have is a nested block, a block within which we provide options, individual options. Okay, and each option tag, as you can see, has a value. Okay, so the values will already be specified. The values will already be specified. And again, that calls my attention to the input types of that calls my attention to the input type of these radio buttons and checkboxes not having values. Okay, so actually they all should have a value, so that we know that as we select this, as we click on checkbox, when we submit the form, we'll know that the value that will be picked up will be the value of these labels that we have here. So they have to have a value, and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's that's how it's meant to be. Okay, yeah, so the same thing would apply to these other ones. Same thing will apply here, so I'm just going to copy that and paste over here. Awesome. So for select elements, the options also have values. Each of the options have values. So for the first one, I'm going to use the unilag. But then within the block, this tag option, we need to still specify some text. So that text that we specify is what will be displayed on the browser. But then when we select the option itself, when we click on the option, behind the scenes is attaching the actual value to the form. And when we submit it, that's the value that goes. So the value that is picked up is not the label, it's not the value that we put in the label, but the value I'll put assigned to this value attribute. So we'll just make up copy and paste for these other two. Paste, paste, copy, paste, paste. So let's see how the select box is presented, the select element. So as you can see, we have like the first item selected, and we can choose which other ones we want to pick up. So that's the select element. Typically, what you would have for select is you have the first item having an empty value, and then it will have like some instruction to say select institution or preferred institution or anything like that, so that the default what is being selected is nothing that states a choice. Okay, like right now no choice has been made here. So but when we click on this, we cannot make our choice. Select this and this. Okay, yeah, so that's how a select element works. We also have input of type range. Input of type range. This basically just gives us a slider that we can pick up, something that can represent maybe a percentage, or on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you like, or something like that. So but this is like a free slider that allows us to make choices. If on an interface, for instance, say like volume up, volume down, kind of choice or elements, we can actually use a slider like this. There are so many things it's used for. It's just not popular on web interfaces, to use sliders like this. But obviously they have applications, and we are not diving deep into those just yet. I'm just showing us the options that we have, some of the options. So we have W3 Schools and other platforms to find specific elements if we have need for anything outside of the ones we're showing right now. So we have a very important element called text area. Actually, text area allows us to provide some more chunk of text. So if you're doing something like an essay, obviously you want some more room where you can type in. Okay, right now we get like a box that is resizable. When we start to style all these elements with CSS, we'll see how to make this look more presentable. For instance, I don't like the control of resizing it, so freely. So we can change that behavior in CSS. So yeah, but that's what a text area allows us to do. Okay, free typing for more chunky text. Um, okay, so I'm trying to pick up, if there's very important elements, input elements that I'm missing. But then I would like to quickly go to styling these elements, how we can use CSS to style and present these elements in a more user friendly way. Okay, so let's dive right into that. So we have our CSS folder. We have our style of CSS already specified. One of the first styles that we usually write to sort of normalize and reset the browser is to remove all margins and paddings, and to use box sizing, providing a value of border box. I already explained what this does in a previous session. Okay, the next thing I'm going to want to do is to think of how I'm going to present this form. Like I just put everything into the page. How do I really want to present this? So somewhere in my head, I am looking at something that is just going to be at the center of the page here, with all the input elements and the fields taking a row. Okay, um, yeah, all of each of these taking a row, but with their labels and the form input themselves. So like this may not be clear to you until we put this, I'll put the code out and get it looking the way it's meant to. But like that's what I want in my head. So I need to think on how to restructure my code to get that structure, to make it so that with CSS I can easily produce that structure. Okay. The first thing I'm looking at is I don't need the line breaks, because the line breaks will give a specific amount of space. But that's not what I want. I want to be able to use margins, margin top and bottom, to space out elements as flexibly as possible, as flexible as possible. Um, so that's why I no longer need the line breaks, even though if we check out designer, it looks a bit awkward, right? So the next thing I'm going to look at is how I may want to group these input elements. Um, so I think each field, I would like to use a div to sort of group each field. So I will call this input field. So an input field can have a label. It may or may not have a label. Yeah, but the input field would cover up that input group. So that's what I'm going to have for all of these other elements as well. So I have input of class name input field, and I would move all of these into those. So let's do that real quick. I guess I can be smarter with this. Okay, so this is like radio group, so I don't want the same thing applying to that. Like I think this input fields should be the one taking that role. This particular, okay, this is a group, so I want this grouped together. That's the option and the checkbox. So this is a particular field, actually, this one field, because we're picking the school of choice here. Okay, so this is another field. Because here we're picking up, yeah, schools of choice. So but for password, yeah, password is a separate field, like a test field, which should be so I think I should even move the fields, the text fields into a particular section, like over here, for instance, the text area as well, which I'll just, description or bio, we call it bio. So I'll cut that and put it up here. So it will also be in its own input field. Okay. So what am I going to do with range? Let me just put it also in an input field. I don't need to find a purpose for it right now, but let it just be its own input field. I think that's the same with the select. Awesome. So yeah, now that we've got the HTML architecture in place, right? It doesn't really make a ton of difference right now. Everything is still squashed up, but at least I'm able to, just target like input field, for instance, and do something to it. I could say background color for each input field, black, color, white. That's the text. Margin, bottom 20 pixels. And already we get some, some block. We can see the blocks of the input fields. You can see the input field as a block now. Then I can use, if I want, 20 pixels padding. Okay. Then on the entire page itself, I think I want to wrap everything with, oh, I see the form already. The form elements can actually be given a maximum width, or rather a width. Yeah, let me use maximum width. Maximum width of 500 pixels. Then margin auto. Okay. So what that would do is margin auto would apply margin to the top, bottom, left, and right. But the one that centralizes it is the margin to the left and margin to the right. Okay. So we can see that the form is taking shape, right? And then we can continue on to style like the input elements themselves. So let me start with the input of type, input type text. Okay, let's see. Let me just be sure that I targeted it right and just give a background of TISO. Yeah, so that worked. So anywhere I have an input of type text, I can specifically target it and give those. But I think I want to also target input of type password. Type password. Okay. This comma is not needed. Yeah. So what I would typically do is just break it into a separate line so that I see more clearly. I would also want a text area to be involved. Text area. So take that background color. Yeah. Awesome. I may also want a select element to be one of the elements taking that background color, and we can see that here as well. Excellent. So with this now, I can go ahead to style these other properties that affect them all. You can see that all of these have border, something that looks like an outline. You can see this outline here. I don't think I like that behavior. Okay, so I'll give them appearance of none, and border of none for now. Let's see. Okay, so another thing I observed is this blue line around it. I was thinking that's what the appearance of none would have done, but I think we'll figure it out as we proceed. I will inspect the browser and see the value that should produce that. So right now the element is still not sitting on a separate row. Okay, so I would change the display type to be of value block, right? And then you can see that that's taking its form like a row. And so I can also go ahead and provide some text in here so that I can see what the value looks like. Let's say Johnson. So what text size looks like here. Okay. Then I can style the text size and say font size, let's say 12 pixels. Padding, that's the space within the box. Padding, top, bottom, left, and right. Say 10 pixels. Awesome. Maybe margin to the top, margin to the bottom. Margin the top 5 pixels. Margin bottom same. Awesome. See, the form is taking shape. And then maybe I also want the form to take the width of 100%. Take width of 100%. Okay. So you can see everything is filling up. So again, see the magic we're doing with CSS from this, commenting out the CSS, we're applying it back to this. So this is just a demonstration of how flexible so this is just a demonstration of how flexible our interface can look, how beautiful the interface can look when we have proper knowledge of how to style elements with CSS. Okay, so obviously we see that some sections are not quite structured well, like select a school of choice. Where was this supposed to be? This is supposed to come in. Oh, okay, yeah, I think I missed that section. It shouldn't be there. Again, we can have what we call field set. We can have what we call field set. When we look at a group of elements, for instance, personal information like first name, last name, maybe password, this could just be personal. And then academic information could then be like always select what we're asking for here, select your preferred school, and so on and so forth. Like how do we get that? How do we get that? So we can actually have a field set element. We can group values. Let me just make another field here. So this would be let me just update this. So this should be last name, last name. Yeah. So those are personal information. Then email and password. We also have input of type email. Um, so essentially, what we have is a text box, okay, but it allows us to have some extra features. Okay, so let me just change this real quick. Um, let me use no value. Right now, when we check on the interface, we see that it doesn't apply the styles that we have here. Obviously, we made that explicit. We just attach it here, and then we have that. So now observe this. When we click on an email input, it sees that we have some email that we've saved already, and it can pick it up for us. And this is because it's an input of type email. Okay. So again, we're trying to organize this form by grabbing all these other boxes. The password. Where's the password field again? Yeah, this should be grouped into this section where we're dealing with personal data. Again, all of this should go into the field set above. Okay, so this field set. So you can see the field set now just having like a border around the entire group of elements. Okay, so that's what a field set essentially is. Obviously, we can style it to apply some separation, some visual separation, and maybe the initial styles that I applied here, I don't like these styles, so I'm just going to go ahead and take that background off. Take the background off of the input blocks so that I just have a free form like so. Margin bottom. Okay, so I think there's a lot of space here. Oh, I see. The image that we have here, or rather the text that we have, should change in color as well. Awesome. So first name, last name, email, password. Awesome. So we can now see the field set sitting right, like enveloping that entire section. We can also apply it to the rest of the content. So, and obviously we can use maybe H3s, to provide like a categorical subtitle. Okay, so to categorize our inputs. So we could call this personal data. You can see personal data. So obviously we need the field set to have some sort of padding, like you can see here, right? Let's do that real quick here. Field sets, have a padding of 20 pixels, and when we get that padding, we can go ahead and remove the padding that we have on the input field itself around here. So we've taken off that padding so that everything realigns properly, is reset. Yeah, so the input field may just take margin bottom. There's really nothing much that this input field is going to do right now, except for just grouping these elements, and we can space them around with just the margin bottom. Okay, so instead of using the BR tag that we applied at the initials, so it's easier for us to just touch the margin bottom and separate those elements. Maybe these elements can take a class. a class of section title. So section title would be styled here, section title. So any section title that exists within a field set, let it take like a margin bottom just to get some space around the elements. You can see um, the margin applies. If you want more room, we can apply this. Awesome. So that would be the same thing. The same thing we would do with the section below. We would have field set, group all of these up to here. I would cut and paste in here. Okay, so we can see that everything now aligns within the field set, the second field set that we have. Nice. Let's see what it looks like in the browser. Nice. Again, we may decide to space out field sets, so we can have like a margin bottom of 20 pixels. You can see that separation. You can see that separation. Awesome. I may also want that the field, or the form rather, has a padding to the top and to the bottom. So padding top, say 40 pixels, so it's not really snapping or touching onto the top of the page. So there's now some room. The same to the bottom. Yeah, so that way we can scroll, and when we scroll down, we still have some room to the bottom. Awesome. Yeah, so this is CSS in a nutshell, how we use it to style fonts. So um, I mean, we can have any design. Like when we get an interface, a visual design for an interface, all we just need to do is understand the design and how to use CSS to reproduce it. So this could be the design as it's handed off to me by a visual designer, like a product designer, a user interface designer. Okay, and then it will be my job as a developer to know the styles, the properties that I would use to arrive at um, these designs. So obviously I can make an input that looks like a sheet of paper. The way we have like a sheet of paper with horizontal lines all over the place, and you can click on the horizontal lines and type. Um, that would just be simply for the input elements here. We could do something like maybe if I want to specifically target just the inputs types of text, password, and email, I could do something like background or background none. Okay, background none. Already we have a border of none also. We can decide to say border button take 1 pixel solid, something that looks like gray. Okay, we can see the design changes to that, and basically can type in here. And maybe I also want to remove the padding to the left so that everything, the text aligns. Padding to the left of 0 pixels so that the text aligns. You can see that, right? So I was looking at changing or removing this outline, this blue outline here. So let's see how that works. I hope I'm able to find the property that does that. Let me see. So for all of these inputs, let's see, outline none. Let's see. Oh, yeah, that's it. Outline none. Outline none. Awesome. So now, as we click into it to type freely, we don't get that blue outline. That's very annoying blue outline. Okay, so yeah, like the possibilities are limitless as long as it is designed. As long as it could be designed, produced in a design, we can actually style it. Can produce the styles with CSS. So I think this is where I would like to call this a wrap. Then I will take questions. Obviously, we can go ahead and clean up this form. I think I might like to do that. So for this section, for instance, yeah, I'll be coming to you, Shola. Um, so this section, for instance, Unilag, like I don't know what this applies to, right? Um, so what I would do is back in my code, let's even trace that. I see that. Oh, I see. Oh, the text area was even put in the wrong spot. So let me put it just right here. Bio under the email. Oh yeah. Um, so I think this read something. This said school of preferred school, right? So let's get that input group and put the highlight of what should be there in there. So we can make this a H5, so it looks really small, and then we can control how it looks. Oh, I was actually looking at the second one, not the first one. So let's put this in here. Select your schools, the schools of choice, right? That was the first one there. Let's see it. Yeah, select your schools of choice. So these, so because we have, we use the input block to wrap this separately. You can see that there's this looks different from this. So obviously we need to account for that and make a separation here. Rather make a merge. We have to merge those. Okay, so now it looks, yeah, it looks okay. Everything is now in line. So obviously we can target specific sections and give different values to them, or apply different sort of groupings. Like I could say within this element, within sections where I have checkboxes, I want to like wrap these separately so that I can use the input boxes. I can use the wrap that I provide to space them out horizontally. Okay, or I could just give a class here. I could call horizontal options, for instance. Horizontal options. Wherever I have horizontal options as a class, and the input elements under them can take a different value. That may separate property. Like all the inputs of type, we could target particular, or from what we see, like generally all the inputs in here, whether they have type of checkbox and all of that. So we want to apply margin right to them. So margin right of 10 pixels, so that we get some space between these. You can see now there is now some space. To make it a bit more obvious, if I make it 20, you can see that took effect as well, and it didn't affect any other section, just this particular section. Awesome. What else might we have? So the space itself, this particular section can actually receive a margin that spaces this out. It's not always very okay to use BR to give spacings, because then this is like a specific, like if this is too much to me, I can't control that BR. Yeah, technically we can, but if you want more space or less space, the BR tag is not the most flexible element to use to produce those spacings. So, but for now, I think we're good. What we may rather have done could be to give a space, attach a margin top to the horizontal options here. So as we have it, horizontal options here, can take a margin top of 20 pixels or 30 or whatever as the case may be. Then we can see that we have more flexibility with that space. We can select into this element, this field set. We can select the horizontal options element there, and we can change that value if we want more space. Awesome. Okay, let's leave it at 15 so that we can apply it again for this second section down there. So again, we just created a framework we could apply and follow here. All we just need to do again is to have this out. Oh, so I see this is H4 and this is supposed to be H4. So this is H4 as well. H4. Then we apply horizontal options. Yeah, horizontal options. And then simply with that, we have the same design that we had with the previous section. I guess we had to change this to 15, margin top 15. Awesome. Maybe margin bottom too could do. Okay, I think we already had margin bottom. Let's see. You can change that to 30 up to 40 or more, as the case may be. So, essentially that's it. That's it. So styling forms is as simple as seeing the design and knowing what styles produce what properties. Okay. So I will call it a wrap here and take questions.